Welcome to the CryptoCounsel at Wiley. We are the podcast that decodes the most important crypto disputes in law and regulation. I'm Josh, an international lawyer who does crypto.
And I'm Frank, a finance and technology litigator who also does crypto.
Frank, it's getting hot out there. It's August 2024 in Washington, D.C. How are you staying cool?
I got the crypto air conditioning rig going.
Well, what both the House and the Senate do is they leave town. They're in recess, so things are quiet over on the Hill. But it's an election year in Washington, D.C., so nothing about politics is particularly quiet. And that's why I'm excited today that we have a special guest, a former congressman, to share some insights about crypto and politics. Also, keep an eye out for an upcoming episode where we will explore a different political perspective, lots of different views on crypto in the political sphere. But before we get to that, we have a special quick bit to cover. Are you ready for this, Frank?
Hit me.
Recent headline is that NVIDIA, which has been hailed by Goldman Sachs as the world's most important stock this year, is becoming more volatile than Bitcoin and Ether. Does that remind you of anything?
Josh, I think it does. I think that you and I just filed a brief in a case involving NVIDIA. In fact, the CryptoCounsel went to the Supreme Court.
The CryptoCounsel's first visit to the Supreme Court. It's an honor and a privilege to do so. We are representing the digital chamber at the forefront of this industry. But what's the issue?
So it's interesting. The case is not a typical scans like a cryptocurrency dispute that the digital chamber or other crypto participants might jump into. It's actually a garden variety stock drop securities fraud case by purchasers of NVIDIA stock, private plaintiffs, who sued NVIDIA because they allege that NVIDIA failed to disclose the extent to which NVIDIA's graphics processing units, which are their bread and butter that tons of different industries use for a variety of different purposes, the extent to which those GPUs were being sold to cryptocurrency miners. And so the plaintiffs did it in a very novel, very aggressive way, which is they claimed that they hired an expert who essentially used some industry-wide cryptocurrency data to come up with assumptions about how much of NVIDIA's business was going to traditional buyers as opposed to cryptocurrency miners who now have a big need for these cards and other kinds of NVIDIA products to drive the compute that they need.
One of the things I found interesting about the case is that the Ninth Circuit, at the very beginning of its opinion, pointed to the volatility of the cryptocurrency industry. And that was kind of an underlying theme of this securities fraud complaint against NVIDIA. But there's a statute that restricts these types of claims.
Right. So, and the Ninth Circuit called it the notorious cryptocurrency industry.
Yes.
Notorious, yes. Which obviously was a sign of where this court was going and why this is a problem that needed some addressing in the Supreme Court. But the statute that you're referring to is the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act, and it was passed in the mid-90s during the internet boom to enact stricter standards around bringing private securities fraud lawsuits in federal court. And one of the big things it did was enact really high pleading standards that as a plaintiff trying to sue a company for securities fraud, you have to allege a very high standard of what's called scienter, meaning the company acted with a certain level of intent or knowledge. You also have to allege with very high particularity the falsity of the thing that you claim to be fraudulent on the part of the company, the thing that caused the investors to buy or sell when they would not otherwise have. And what's wild and really interesting for the cryptocurrency industry is when Congress enacted that law in the dot-com boom, it was super interested and concerned about the technology industry. At that time, the internet companies that were coming through and making sure that they didn't get hit with security suits unnecessarily because of their high growth, the high volatility that comes with that, and just a sort of new emerging market that was susceptible to a lot of potential strike suits by plaintiffs. And fast forward to today, the same exact concerns are now driving people in the cryptocurrency space and people like NVIDIA who rely on cryptocurrency to some extent as a buyer of their products, because the same problems are repeating themselves where plaintiffs are coming forward with novel theories because, according to them and according to the court that bought it, it's a notorious industry that has all these problems that are, when you actually unpack them, not really rooted in any science or hard data. So the brief that you and I filed and other colleagues at our team here in Wiley makes the point that the legislative history of the PSLRA, the congressional statute, is exactly designed to protect the industry, like the cryptocurrency industry and other technology industries. So it was sort of a straight line between then and now, and a really fun brief to write.
It really was. And thank you to the Digital Chamber for its leadership in this space and for the opportunity to represent them before the Supreme Court. And on that point of the parallels between the 1990s internet technology and cryptocurrency today, that's something we're going to take up with our guests. So let's get into it. I am delighted today to have as our guest David McIntosh, the president of Club for Growth. Welcome, David.
Great to be with you, Josh.
So you are the person to talk to because you are someone who knows about the crypto industry, but you also know about politics. You are a former congressman from the state of Indiana, right?
Yes.
Formerly served as an official in the executive branch.
Yeah, we oversaw all the regulatory development in the first Bush administration.
And now we're in this new era of crypto, and that's going to be our focus today. Having that political background that you do, how did you first learn about cryptocurrency? How did you get interested?
It's interesting, Josh, because most people in my generation are, what's this crypto stuff? I don't really understand it. And I was with a group of our fellows. We've got young emerging leaders that we bring together and teach them about free markets and how to talk about that type of policy. And a group of them came and said, David, we're taking you to dinner. We're going to tell you about Bitcoin and how it's going to change the world. And so at that dinner, they explained to me what Bitcoin was, how it worked, how the larger crypto industry and environment functioned in the United States. And they were enthusiastic about it. It dawned on me then, listening to them at dinner, this sounds a lot like the internet did when I was in Congress back in the 90s. Right? This new thing where you could send emails to people. And, you know, we take it for granted today, but back then it was all new, different, innovative. People came up with creative new ideas. And so I thought, let's investigate this. It seems to me like a driver for economic growth, which is what Club for Growth is all about. Innovation, freedom. And so I started going to a couple conferences, particularly a couple of the Bitcoin conferences. And
what was your first one?
First one was in Miami about 3 years ago. Huge group of people there. As I would wander around and talk to people, they were from all walks of life. And I would tell them I'm in politics and that we really like Bitcoin. And almost universally, the answer I got was, oh, that's great, but can't this be a bipartisan issue? It's just a good thing. Can't people in Washington recognize that and just accept it? And that really gave me the idea that if Club for Growth is going to engage in this, we should try to do it in a bipartisan way. But I reached out to some friends who were engaged in as moderate Democrats, more free market oriented or pro-business oriented. And they were involved and had clients that were crypto clients. And so we've agreed to work together on it. In fact, we set up a new organization, Blockchain Innovation Project, or BIP, which has a code word in Bitcoin land. But Tim Ryan is one of the leaders there. He and I co-chair the effort. And there's a Democrat super PAC called the Moderates that works with us as well. And It's been a great experience because what we realized was we had so much more in common than we had differences. And as you know, here in Washington, the differences have been exaggerated, right?
Right.
And gotten violent, actually. And now there's a call for more unity. And we were talking to each other, yeah, we were there a year ago. And maybe we can show people how it's done.
I love that. And I want to go back to your initial reaction because there's a line about the internet that when the internet is first bursting onto the scene, some of the commentary was, oh, this will be a great new fax machine.
Right.
A dismissive, this is not going to be that important. And I think a lot of folks have felt the same way about crypto.
Yes.
But you seem to have sensed that there was something different here. You dug in, you investigated, as you put it. What was promising about it?
So meeting with particularly a lot of the young innovators in this space, they'd come up and tell me, look, we're working on a company that can do financial exchanges all over the globe and drive the cost down from 1% to less than a tenth of a cent or a hundredth of a cent. So huge savings, and we can do it faster, more efficient. They were excited about it. I talked to somebody, in fact, we have a candidate we're supporting who set up a company to put car titles on the blockchain. And so it was one of those innovations that just allowed the imagination to take over. And people are trying new things, experimenting with things, putting together new companies, hiring computer engineers to write the code and to put it together. And you saw also enthusiasm for personal freedom. People were saying, look, if you ever have a country like Canada that decides they're going to confiscate people's bank accounts, well, if they've got a wallet that allows them to have Bitcoin, they're safe because the government can't reach into that. And so I'm a big believer in individual freedom, particularly financial and economic freedom. So there was a lot of attraction there as well.
I think it's fantastic that with your focus, you're able to cross some of the partisan divides, find partnerships, talk about the common denominator of why crypto can be a force for good. But there's a lot of rhetoric out there now that is partisan, particularly around cryptocurrency. Why is that? Why do you think this is becoming a more political issue, particularly in this election cycle?
Yeah. So the Biden administration started out sort of slightly favorable towards it. Gensler entertained Sam Bankman-Fried and thought this was a good thing that he was putting together with FTX. And then when it was revealed that it was a huge fraud, it was embarrassing to them, and the pendulum swung hard against crypto and all of the different cryptocurrencies and crypto innovations. Guidance was given out from the White House to banking regulators, the SEC, CTFC, all of them essentially be suspicious about this and look for financial fraud. That has created a record of, in many cases, litigation going after companies like Ripple and Coinbase that have slowed down and inhibited the development of the industry here. I hear stories of people going over to Dubai to look at financial transactions because it's easier to get things done there. And then one of the Republican candidates, Vivek Ramaswamy, was a big proponent of it. When he dropped out of the race, he went to Donald Trump and said, I think his first pitch was be against a central bank digital coin, come out hard against it. And that classic Trump statement, Vivek told me to be against it, so I'm against it, right? And I think he caught up later to figure out what that actually meant and the implications and has stuck by it. And then J.D. Vance, who he just picked as vice president, was already writing legislation to have streamlined regulatory processes that would allow the industry to flourish. And I think the Republicans had a sense we can get a political advantage, probably a small number of voters. Our polls, we've done polling, 65% of Americans don't know what it is, don't understand it. Probably slightly larger majority after Sam Bankman-Fried are suspicious of it. But people who actually own crypto are huge fans and proponents of it. So I think they sensed in a political way, here's a small micro-target audience who would be single-issue voters based on keeping crypto free and active in the United States. And the Trump campaign seized on that and has been campaigning on it. It paid benefits in the tech sector, where David Sachs held a big event in San Francisco. My guess is of the 70 people that were there, probably 50 of them had voted for Democrats prior to that. But they saw Trump as somebody who was going to take up the cause that they cared about. And so they supported him. That's made it polarized in the moment. The good news is, Josh, I see moderate Democrats kind of coming around. Elizabeth Warren came out hard against it, right, and has been the leader. I think Gensler views himself as responding to her pressure to be tough in the regulatory sector on it. But you're seeing now younger Democrats, Richie Torres, others, who are saying, no, this is something that's good for the country. It helps the underserved population, and we want to be competitive in the world stage. And so you're seeing a swing back towards more support for it, which I think after the election can get us to a consensus, a bipartisan consensus. This is good. We should figure out legislation that will let us prosper with that. And I'm optimistic and very happy with that development.
It's been interesting over the course of this year, a couple of political developments. In May, Trump was the first major presidential candidate to allow donations of cryptocurrency to his campaign. So there's a financial element to this, and then there's the direct support. And on that note, I would say I was at the Consensus Conference in Austin, Texas this year. The head note speaker was RFK. Huge enthusiasm around his support of cryptocurrency. But what was most shocking to me is that in a crowded town hall type discussion, a straw poll, how many of you in this room are single issue voters on crypto? And it was by far the majority. Now, obviously, this is a self-selected audience, but it was the intensity of that support. And so some of the debate is how many of these people are there? That there's different estimates. I've seen 18 million to 52 million. But what's not being debated is the intensity of their concern about cryptocurrency. And so how much are you seeing this? Is this a tiny minority with a huge voice, or is this the emerging reality and it's going to be more present in the U.S. market?
In the overall electorate, it's probably 5, 6, 7% of voters. But in a swing state where it's decided by half a percentage point, that's a huge shift or potential audience. And so you're going to see a lot of campaigning to that group. You also have seen some developments where the grassroots groups have tried to reach out and organize people to get them to weigh in with Congress to say, hey, this is important to me and my life, and I wish you would have policies that would support crypto and Bitcoin. And that development it's getting attention up on Capitol Hill. One of the things that I'm also excited about seeing is the kind of consensus emerging around a lot of Club for Growth folks are very libertarian, like government should do nothing, just let the industry develop itself. You have the problem there with Sam Bankman-Fried and fraud, but also the pump and dump cryptos that if you're not savvy in investing, they'll push and make it sound like it's the next penny stock that's going to take off. And then when it gets to a certain price, the founders dump all their ownership, pocket the money, and everybody else is left with essentially worthless crypto. And so some level of regulation to protect people and investors is that, especially as it's becoming more mainstream. The other development that's happened in the last couple of years is financial advisors are starting to tell people, put 0.5% of your holdings into some form of crypto. And now that you've got ETFs and other ways to diversify that, that's mainstreaming, where just across the board investors are saying, okay, I want to know a little bit more about that, but if you're telling me that's a good hedge, if there's a down market, then I'll do that.
There was a recent statement from BlackRock that kind of went full pendulum swing on this issue, saying, what is this Bitcoin? We don't understand. It's not worth anything, to, yes, this is an important part of a portfolio. And I think that is going to, when it starts hitting people's actual pockets, the American people are going to care more about this. And that leads a little bit to caring about how they vote on crypto issues. So I'm going to read just a couple headlines that I've seen in recent news. So one from the New York Times, how crypto money is poised to influence the election. Another, crypto's huge moment scrambling U.S. politics. Clearly, there's a lot of money here in crypto.
Yes.
And there's a lot of concern, both in terms of intense support and from some folks in the industry to opposition or concern about how do we responsibly regulate this. So there's the political issue, and then there's also the money issue.
Right.
And what is the interaction of those? How are some of the new Club for Growth is a political action committee. How are some of the political action committees in this space identifying issues, supporting candidates, participating in the crypto debate?
And Club for Growth Super PAC, we have a separately branded one called the Bitcoin Freedom Fund. We tend to look in primaries. Are people pro-Bitcoin? Are they going to vote with Warren Davidson to have the sensible regulations? But the big players are new Super PAC that a lot of the industry folks funded, Fair Shake, and they have raised phenomenal amount of money. What I've noticed there is Republicans generally are regarded as supportive. And so they've played in some of the races to support different Republican candidates. But the big effect they're having is a subtle one in the Democrat Party, where Senator Rosen, Senator Tester are up against challenges this year. They're in swing states, and they're incumbents that are running against Republicans that are pro-crypto. And I've noticed their initial stance that people interpreted as being more in line with Elizabeth Warren and against crypto, they're softening that. They're shifting it. They're saying, I'm open to this. There seem to be some good things that can come from this. And again, as we talked about, that's a necessary and good development to make this a more bipartisan consensus that it's good for the economy. Sherrod Brown has sort of been resistant to that, continues to be opposed and perceived as being opposed. And his opponent actually would know the most about the blockchain because he started a company using that technology. So you're going to get in Ohio this direct comparison between the two viewpoints. And typically what happens is after an election, if one side wins in that type of lineup, that starts pointing everybody else into, okay, that's the politically smart place to be. Let's align our policy thinking with that. You saw it in the Senate where there was a banking regulation the Biden administration had that was perceived as being adverse to cryptocurrency. That was just a small part of the regulation. But the public perception of the vote was, are you for crypto or not? And 10 Democrat senators joined with all the Republicans to use the Congressional Review Act to overturn that regulation. President Biden ultimately vetoed that, so the regulation stayed in place. But that was a signal politically that there is an emerging group in the Democrat Party that are going to be favorable for this. And like I said, I think that's a very positive development.
That's fascinating. And I think it relates to the fact that this is not an inherently partisan issue.
Right.
It's a technology.
Interestingly, one of the great benefits of Bitcoin and some of the other crypto is that populations, groups that are relatively unbanked, they're poor, they don't have access to the banking services, tend to adopt Bitcoin as a way of transacting. And so it's a way to benefit groups that traditionally the Democrat Party has been very much put forward as groups they care about. They want to make sure policy helps them and serves them. So in some ways, it makes sense that it not be partisan, right? Because you've got interests on both sides that align with having crypto in the economy.
Absolutely. And we've had on this podcast as a guest a government official from El Salvador that has made Bitcoin its national tender.
Right.
And there, one of the arguments in favor of Bitcoin in the country is the transmission of funds across borders and how it's easier, it's simple for the underbanked population in El Salvador to send money via Bitcoin instead
or
of
receive
US dollar.
it from relatives that might be working in the U.S. And that makes a lot of sense to me, that you're going to have a great new platform to help people who are underserved.
How long till we see a viable U.S. political candidate arguing for Bitcoin as national tender?
Oh, that's very interesting. I don't think you'll see that. I was just up on the Hill talking to Lindsey Graham about all this. And you may know, he and Elizabeth Warren are concerned about the use of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency to fund terrorist activities. We've assembled a group of experts who were career folks at CIA, NSA, the Justice Department, FBI, and Treasury. And we were briefing the senator about how, no, in fact, cryptocurrency is easier for law enforcement and anti-terrorist activities to succeed. And in fact, there was an article that came out about a year ago where Hamas told people, stop sending money with Bitcoin. They can track who you are. And so
there's a reason China shut down Bitcoin, right?
Right. And so the reality is it's actually a good development for what Senator Graham cares about. But we were talking about it, and he says, well, I think what about protecting the dollar, right? Because I want to protect the dollar. And one of the things this group told him basically is that, well, crypto is the way to do it. You have a dollar coin, and it becomes an extension of the dollar, if you will. But then transactions are dollar denominated when you use these crypto dollar coins. Conservatives don't want the central bank to develop that coin because of the ability to track people's financial transactions. But you keep it in the private sector, voluntary, whether you use it or whether you use traditional banking. And it's a way of shoring up and strengthening the dollar around the world. So I don't think you'll see people saying Bitcoin should become the dollar here in the U.S., but I do think, though, you'll see an argument that crypto is a way of helping to strengthen the dollar.
I want to dig into this divide because I think it's really interesting between the Bitcoin enthusiast and the central bank digital coin.
Yeah.
Because it's not obvious always how that's going to fall into existing political lines. Do you see candidates wrestling with this? Let's say I'm pro Bitcoin. What do I say about a central bank district?
Right. Honestly, I see my Democrat friends wrestling with it more than the Republicans. The liberty argument that you don't want the central bank to know every transaction that you make or try to exercise the power. Imagine somebody saying, well, we don't think people should buy guns, so you can't use a central bank digital coin to buy guns. And if that becomes ubiquitous and the only money effectively, then you can use it to change people's behaviors. Republicans instinctively are against that and oppose it. The Democrats, less so, but they're starting to realize, okay, if we can get the benefits of a dollar coin where there'd be consensus that everybody should be able to use it, keep it in the private sector, and then, but still get the benefits for us in extending the reach of the dollar, then we'll be for it. But there's been a little more resistance there. When we could find consensus on reasonable regulation quicker than we could find consensus about what to do about the dollar coin.
I think this
or the central bank digital coin.
Right. I think this also puts a finger on why Bitcoin has been perceived as different. Even the SEC, Gensler, this is not a security.
Right.
And it has a level of mainstream acceptance. But ultimately, it's the transparency, right? I mean, The argument about funding of international terrorists applies fully to the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
And if anything, Bitcoin is more trackable.
Yeah, because dollars are fungible and you get corrupt banking systems around the world. People can funnel it through that and get it to the terrorists.
And then as applied to political giving, I'm curious because there was a recent report. I mentioned that Trump had allowed crypto donations to his campaign. There was some early reporting about how are those donations going, and it reported in precise figures the amounts of certain donations, and even some Dogecoin was in the mix, and it had the exact dollar value, and you know who that is. So in terms of political giving, this is Would you say it's the opposite of dark money?
Yeah, no, it's instantly can be publicized, known, and you see some holders reluctant to do it, therefore. So they'll cash out their Bitcoin and then contribute dollars. Also, what I've noticed, particularly with Bitcoin holders, they view it as a store of wealth rather than as cash that they can use to spend on things. They love it, Club for Growth and our Bitcoin Freedom Fund. We accept Bitcoin. We've been doing it for a while. They love the fact that we can accept it, but in fact, they would prefer to hold on to their Bitcoin.
They'd rather pay you in dollars?
Yeah. No, they view it as an investment and a store of wealth, and so they pay us in dollars.
That's fascinating. One of the questions we've talked about is how soon until all lawyers in the U.S. will accept their fees in Bitcoin? And
I bet soon. One of the people I work with is Josh Mandel, and when he was treasurer at the state of Ohio, he was the first treasurer in the country to allow people to pay their state taxes using Bitcoin.
I did not know that was happening.
He broke the barrier there.
Because you can pay your taxes in El Salvador in Bitcoin. So it's for the state of Ohio. Are there any other states?
I don't know. We'd have to go check.
And how's that received by the general public? Take Ohio, for example.
I think people say, oh, that's nice. 70% of the people say, oh, I don't know what that means, so I'm writing my check.
It's almost like a microcosm of the Bitcoin issue because you have the folks who really believe in Bitcoin don't want to pay their taxes because they believe that their money's going to go, the Bitcoin value is going to go up, and the rest of the people have
no idea what it is. But at the time, it was very symbolic because Jamie Dimon was going on TV saying Bitcoin's terrible, don't do it. And Josh was saying, no, we're going to accept it.
One branch we've not talked about is the courts. You mentioned some of the litigation that's going on. Do you think that the courts are an appropriate place for these debates to happen, or should we be pushing more for Congress to take action?
I think it'd be better for Congress to legislate and the regulatory agencies to set standards. For one thing, they have access to expertise more, not that they're experts themselves. In fact, one of our friends and allies has a bill that was drafted that basically required the regulatory agencies to hire crypto experts. So when they're developing the standards, they actually understand the technology in the industry. It'd be a smart thing for the agencies to do, much like getting the economic regulators to hire economists, right? So they can understand it and advise the lawyers that have to draft the regulations. And the courts don't have that expertise. I would think they do not want to march into a new field and set standards when they don't feel that expertise is there. But I do believe, and we've seen courts start to do this, if the agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission appear to be overreaching in their enforcement more than regulatory, they haven't really issued regulations, overreaching in enforcement, the courts are going to say, no, that doesn't fit the law as we understand it. Go back and figure out what needs to be done.
Right. And the courts are going to cause more uncertainty. There have already been some splits between judges on these cases, and it's going to take a lot of time before anything, for example, winds up to the Supreme Court. I think that, too, this cloud of uncertainty, which is coming from some of the SEC actions, the uncertainty in the court. You mentioned earlier that some folks in the industry would rather be doing their business in Dubai.
Yeah.
And is that an argument that the American people care about? I personally think they should, right?
Right.
If we have clarity about cryptocurrency, we will have more investment in the industry, and that will be good for the American people, for our economy. But is that something that is resonating with the electorate?
So right now, not that much, because a majority of people don't interact with cryptocurrency or Bitcoin so that it doesn't impact their lives. And so if you go and say, well, it's going to move to Dubai or even Great Britain, places that we like to do business with, they're okay, well, that's not good, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But I think as it becomes more accepted, people understand the potential and culture catches up with the innovations in the industry, then I think American pride's going to step in and say, I don't know if it's true that we developed it, but we probably feel we developed it. And let's keep it here and keep the innovation here.
As long
right?
as no one knows where Satoshi was, we're clear making the claim. Right?
Exactly. That is the American way.
What, from your vantage at Club for Growth, what is the biggest selling point to the broader American public right now? What are politicians saying that is resonating?
I think what they're saying, a little bit of that pride and national pride. This is new. It has great potential. We want to keep the innovation here so America can be first to market, first to develop things. That's probably the argument that resonates the most with Americans. For people who already engage with it, own Bitcoin or have started to invest in the different cryptos, we want to see something that you're part of already thrive and progress and grow here in the country.
In terms of election funding, finance issues, are there any innovations aside from direct contributions in crypto?
I have not seen that. I could see reporting being done on the blockchain. You could see new innovations for how people communicate with each other being done on the blockchain. But the actual process of politics, it's more the funding. But even there, when we receive Bitcoin, we end up changing it to dollars and pay the TV stations in dollars.
Right. A few more Super Bowl ads for crypto, a few more political speeches mentioning crypto, and we'll be there, right?
We'll be there. Yeah, no, exactly. Ironically, in a parody, the ad warned people about it.
Fortune favors the brave?
Yes, exactly. But it's exciting to me. I think the potential for innovation and changes, I'll come back in 5 years, say, hopefully before, and we'll be probably the different way we do our cell phones or the different way we transact with our bank. It'll be normal that we're using the blockchain, and we'll think, what did they do before this, right? So it's that type of powerful technological change that will bring improvement, squeeze out efficiency, and make people's lives better. We just have to make sure that there aren't roadblocks to it being commercialized.
Right. And that's in no small part due to all the innovators in this space, including the innovators in crypto and politics. So thanks for your leadership in that. And thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.